In my perspective, a lot of marketing today is very, very digital first. Everything is so digital, so online focused, that an event is something that, it's very typically physical, face-to-face, offline. Do you see offline events matter more than digital interactions with the end customers?
Well, the key with digital events is that you can track your customers a lot more easily, and the type of leads that you're generating on a digital level is much more data driven and quantifiable and measurable. When you're going out to an event, you're going out there as an individual and as a business, but ultimately as individuals speaking to other individuals. It is more difficult to quantify. It is more difficult to look at what the return on marketing investment it is for a physical event, for example, especially when they can succumb to some pretty high costs. Personally, from my customer standpoints, I would say physical events, whether you attend them or whether you create them from a brand standpoint, is a brand play. Digital events are almost a lead generation play. So you can really bring out the best in both, but there are different goals in both of them.
From law school in Madrid to global brand strategy at EY and new product launches at Booking.com, Natalia has always operated at the intersection of strategy and scale. Natalia today is a fractional CMO, the founder of NXERA Consulting, where she helps ventures and scale-ups turn brand strategy into business KPIs. Natalia is also a consulting partner at the Agentix Co, which is a boutique AI-powered growth consultancy, and the founder of the Marketing Breakfast Club, the growing international community of forward-thinking marketers shaping what's next, with chapters in Lisbon, Madrid, Amsterdam. Natalia's work spans continents, but her focus stays sharp, aligning brand, GTM, and demand to deliver real measurable growth. Welcome to Oh Frac, the podcast where top fractional leaders share their wins, struggles, and stories from the trenches. Hosted by Adir Ron. Welcome to Oh Frac, the podcast where we dive into the world of fractional leadership, the wins, the struggles, and everything in between. I'm your host, Adir Ron, fractional CMO. And my guest today is Natalia Arcila Barbour. Hi, Natalia.
Hi, Adir. Great to be here, and thank you.
Great to have you here. That's quite a long introduction and a lot of hats that you're wearing. So let's kick it off with an icebreaker question. You've worked across 4 continents. What's the one place that totally caught you by surprise business-wise?
Oh, so different at such different levels. I have to say Asia Pacific in Hong Kong was very eye-opening because what we don't realize is that Asia Pacific, as segmented as it is, a lot of businesses manage it as a one and then localizing across countries. So it's a very interesting challenge to talk about a whole region and then easily be able to break it down into various different countries and localization strategies. So a very interesting place to work for sure.
Yeah, and I can totally resonate. I think in most of the businesses that I've worked with, when they're talking APAC, it's like one package. Let's do APAC. But once you kind of earlier in my career, when I was in mobile games, that's when kind of APAC was one of our focuses, and then it's kind of when I realized that it's so different. Like each country in that region is completely different, and you really need to understand it's like not just localization, not just translation, it's localization. You need to understand colors and culture and how they look at things and interfaces, and everything is so different.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it is a challenge, but it's a fun one.
All right. So, Natalia, how the frack did you get here? Let's, you started in law and then moving all the way to marketing. How does that journey look like?
It's a long one, but I have to say it is a journey where you're constantly discovering what you don't want. And I think that it's really important to know, you're always going to change what you want, and every day it might go in a different direction, but knowing what you don't want and fortunately and unfortunately, it started at law school, or it started when I finished law school. I finished my last year and I thought, great, started practicing for a few months and went, I definitely don't want to do this. Very in the box. You have to be very ambitious. Nope. So I decided to then move away. I did a master's in London. Crises had hit at that moment as well, and so that master's in business management kind of started getting me in the career, in a path where I was like, okay, well, at least it's not law. I then created a bit of a career for myself within law firms doing marketing and business development. And
Okay, interesting.
yeah, and then it's very interesting because having gone from professional services law firms, which are very old school, then I was like, okay, we need to get out of here and continue moving. And I decided that the big move wasn't going to be, just an industry move. If I wanted to take a jump, it had to go with a country move, because it's harder to make a case and stay in London and say, okay, I want to continue, and or rather just take that big leap into something really new and really different, into a new region. So I was headhunted into a role in Hong Kong. I started into the consultancy business. I was with FTI Consulting. Then I moved into Ernst & Young, EY, actually.
Yeah.
I should say that because they rebranded years ago and I still have to remind people that it's Ernst & Young, EY. But that really gave me, having been very self-taught in my career, it gave me a launch into, wow, what the marketing looks like, what lead generation looks like, what sort of brand, global to local campaigns are we doing? How do we shift our brand awareness? So all of that. And then, crises, or rather COVID hit. And not only did COVID hit and Hong Kong really locked down physically, but also democratically. And so it was time to move. There was a role with EY with the global brand team. So I got a really great taste. They said anywhere in Europe, as long as you're in Europe. So we went, let's do Amsterdam. And here we are.
Always a good choice.
Always a good choice. And
Yes.
the what I really wanted to do was, I really thrive on challenges. And I thought being at EY is going to be easy and wonderful my whole life, but it's going to be very lateral and it's going to be very same. So I ripped the Band-Aid off as much. It was sad. Joined Booking.com, which was phenomenal because it gave me, it still had that B2B element, but it moved into the B2C, the world of performance, the world of numbers, data, really amazing learning curve. And then my contract with Booking finished, and I kind of weighed out, all right, let's what are we going to do? Let's do corporate. Do we jump in? And I took the leap, and I took the leap of faith in a very kind of walk the walk and fake it till you make it way, saying, I'm doing a little consultancy on the side, and here I am. And then somebody said, oh, well, help me with this project and, bill me. I'm like, oh my God, I need to go sign myself up at the Chamber of Commerce. And that's how it rolled in. And I think it really was about jumping in, but really wanting to get a sense for this new way of working that I love.
So, okay. So that's kind of like, your journey to starting your first customer, and then obviously signing up with the Chamber of Commerce, which is not so hard. I can attest to that. And then how does, let's look at kind of like your early days as a fractional. So you got your first client. They're saying, maybe someone in your network is saying, hey, bill me, help me out, bill me. And you're like, okay, this is nice. This is great. What's next? How do you go from there to kind of, figuring out, did you call yourself fractional back then? Did you even know what fractional was? Or was that something that kind of, materialized along the way?
I think that's something definitely that materialized along the way. And I still call myself different things depending on who I'm talking to. And I think partially it's because a lot of people still don't understand the concept of fractional. They talk about freelance, they talk about consulting, and
interim sometimes. There's a lot of confusion.
And what's interesting is, Adir, having spent my life doing business development and marketing for law firms, which is the business of relationships, I really took that next step in that way. So I'm lucky to have a personality that allows me to be very open and get to know people. And I've lived in different cities, and that really has shaped a network for me. So my first step was, how are we going to target clients? And I had two ways. One was, let's get out there, let's write some articles, which I started, and it was a hit and miss. My network wasn't engaging, but then again, my network is marketeers, it wasn't industry. and
Yeah.
and so there I kind of put my hat on and saying, okay, what would you have advised these professional service people that are really being experts on their servicing their expertise? And they're constantly out there, and I was preaching to them forever. You've got to get out there, you've got to build a profile for yourself, you've got to target and exactly know who you're targeting. And when you're targeting, and this is very personal to me, it's building a lead generation strategy around the people that you want to work with. Why would they want to work with you? What are the synergies? Where are their gaps? What do they drink in the morning? Is it coffee? Is it tea? You're really getting to understand who you're aiming for, and then starting to build a little bit of a pipeline there. So that first part, my first client was actually a cold outreach that I did to him, but he was an EY Entrepreneur of the Year winner for Azerbaijan, and I had worked for EY, and he was building an online travel agency, an AI online travel agency, and I worked for Booking. And I said,
A lot of
hey,
convergence points. Yeah.
why don't we have a talk? And 2 days later, and it was 6 months down the line on a retainer. And so that, I really believe in the business of relationships. When you have that wanting, you need to want that kind of way. And then the other way is really getting your brand out through events, speaking engagements, getting out at conferences, and networking, and really building that. So it's very different. I think other fractionals go out and they build a brand online for themselves. Other people just maybe work with a couple of clients in and out, and then they get referred. So the strategies are different depending on how you want to take it.
That's really interesting because I think almost everyone that I had on the podcast so far talked about how the first, 5, 6, 10 customers first year is always around like their personal network, people within their network that they reached out to. And here is Natalia saying, hey, I did a cold outreach off the bat. And then, you went with events. And you and I talked about this a bit before. Let's talk about events, because I think events is something that's very interesting. And I can share from my experience that being someone who moved to the Netherlands a year and a half, a bit more than a year ago, like being lost without a network because I'm new in town, I don't know anyone. The first thing that I did was, hey, let's find events. And funny enough, and I have to admit and have a full disclosure, that's where I met Natalia at a Marketing Breakfast Club event at the end of last year. And we'll get to talk about the Marketing Breakfast Club in a few minutes. But let's talk about events. How do you see kind of events play out for you in terms of kind of building your brand?
Well, I think there are two. I would say there are two types of ways in looking at events. One is attending them, and really attending targeted events that might be specific to your industry, or specific to kind of your target audience, where you want to go. I find that there are a lot of events out there for marketing, and I find those events are for me and my knowledge. But the events that I go out to and are travel events, for example, or events on very specific industry events, those are really to find networks rather than to get knowledge from the events. And so there's an element of mingling and getting to know people, and of course doing the according follow-ups, etc. But then there's another side of events that we have is talking and speaking at events. I found that's been really useful to elevate presence and personal brand. One of the things with events is that, and I would say this to all fractionals out there, industry events are always looking for people. And us fractionals are kind of a neutral no man's land for these events, where you have industry experts that are going to be sitting at a panel and giving their opinions, but they want someone that is not wedded to a business or to an industry, that can be removed and sit there as the mediator, sit there as the chair, or just opening those events. And so it's a huge opportunity to be able to say, and you've got to love it. And I have to say, I didn't know until I got on stage last March how much I love doing it. And because of my role, they need someone neutral to be able to side on these events and have the fireside chats and the moderation. So that was definitely a way of really pivoting into a different type of profiling, and then creating my own events. And I think that, such as the Marketing Breakfast Club, it's about expanding networks, and it's always about also just giving other people opportunities to grow as well. And I think that's really great with Marketing Breakfast Club as it comes, because people also need the events, and it's really easy to go to these events, but also it's really easy to create these events, and it's just hitting the button and being able to, everybody says, oh, this is so easy. Well, we found a bar. The guy at the bar really needed business, and I put you on Meetup, and this is regular, and we're having 20 people come in once a month, so I think it's all about kind of strategizing what you want to get out of those events and those networks.
And have you, so, I can definitely see kind of like the long-term network building effect of events. But what about short-term? Have you found clients through events that you've attended or participated in? And did that generate business for you?
So I have found that most events have led to more specific small events or interactions with other people that have led to business. So, for example, one of the events led me to a kind of a startup community in the UK. That startup community then was bringing in other startups and was teaching startups how to build brands, etc. And that got me a lead and ultimately a client. So it doesn't necessarily mean that for every event you're going to get something, you're going to get billable work.
Obviously, yeah.
But it's exponential. I mean, if you end up going out there and you are, presenting, and you've got your brand in front of 300 people that are the industry that you're an expert in, and then you happen to wing some good comments and experience, and you're mingling, people are bound to reach out sooner or later to propose new opportunities, whether it's for work or new collaboration. So yeah, definitely, I think there's an exponential knock-on effect.
Awesome. And what about, so, you're utilizing events for yourself to kind of grow your network, get clients eventually through that kind of like exponential reach. Is that something that you also kind of preach for your customers as well, as like a growth channel or a brand visibility? So obviously brand visibility is like the first thing that you think of when you think of events, but is that something that you kind of, it's kind of like reverse eating your own dog food? Typically it goes the other way around. You do something for your clients and then you say, hey, I can do this for myself as well. Is this the other way around as well? Do you see events for your customers as like a source of growth?
Absolutely. And, I think one of the things is that a lot of the customers, they don't want to pay to play. And you say, okay, well, I don't want to have a big booth in this, in this event because it's very expensive. But it's what I tell them. This is a way for them to create, and I work mostly with organizations that do a lot of lead generation. They're more specific rather than just going out and doing mass advertising, for example. But it is a little bit more on a B2B side where these events will have leads for them as well. Now, these events need to be extremely targeted. You need to understand why you're going, who you're reaching out to, and more importantly, how you're going to follow up. Because I find that a lot of times I've had clients go to events and they're like, wow, that was great. And I just collected a load of business cards. And now what? Here you go, marketing. No, that's not the way it goes.
Or here you go, sales.
Or sales.
Also not the way to go.
Exactly. So it is about finding commonalities and building those bridges between the people in that network that you have created at those events. And likewise, I mean, depending, and a lot of times in services, I find that it's really important, from customers that have been experts in, the industry experts in helicopters to industry experts in IoT. You want to be known as that expert, and the way to be known as that expert, and I would say, this is part of your field marketing, but it's part of your strategy, is to get out there and be known for that expertise. And the best way is to talk it out there in those events and be seen as the first one that is talking about developments and trends in the market, etc. So I think it's really important, depending on what products or services you're offering, to be able to be in front of the right people and speaking at the right times.
So from your perspective, events are a crucial part of building a company or startup or scale up's credibility.
Not crucial. I mean, I think there are different strategies that other companies might prioritize, but it's definitely something to keep in mind for sure. I think that it does help. I find that a lot of the events are bringing in the latest trends. You're staying on the forefront, not only on an informational side, but you're constantly going out there and meeting people that otherwise, how would you meet? So depending on your business, depending on your service, I think events can be more important than others. But for sure, I think everybody should definitely scope it out as an opportunity.
Okay. And last question on events before we kind of move on to the next subject is, how do you see kind of events playing, so we're, at least in my perspective, a lot of marketing today is very, very, digital first. Everything tends to be, and especially now with AI, and we'll talk about the Agentix a bit later in our conversation, but, so you have everything, everything is so digital, so online focused, that an event is something that, it's very typically physical, face-to-face, offline. How do you see kind of that playing together, that importance? Do you see it as sometimes, like, obviously that depends on niche, I guess, but like, do you see offline events matter more than digital interactions with the end customers of your customers?
Well, the key with digital events is that you can track your customers a lot more easily, and the type of leads that you're generating on a digital level is much more data driven and quantifiable and measurable. When you're going out to an event, you're going out there as an individual and as a business, but ultimately as individuals speaking to other individuals. It is more difficult to quantify. It is more difficult to look at what the return on marketing investment it is for a physical event, for example, especially when they can succumb to some pretty high costs. So I would say, the reach as well on digital is so much greater. For me, personally, from my my customer standpoints, events a lot of times are they might be organizing the events, and they might be hackathons, for example, and they're actionable, and they're bringing a view to the audience of who they are. So it's, I would say, physical events, whether you attend them or whether you create them from a customer from a brand standpoint, is a brand play. Digital events are almost a lead generation play. So you can really, bring out the best in both. but there are different goals in both of them that you'll be trying to reach, and there's different tracking and there's different costs.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk a bit more about the Marketing Breakfast Club. So you talked a bit about how it started, which seemed pretty simple, but what drove you to start the Marketing Breakfast Club?
So in Hong Kong, nobody wants to go home because the houses are small and food in the supermarket is expensive, and it's cheaper to go out and be able to have a drink and dinner outside. So everybody's doing networking events. Everybody's doing round tables. Everybody's going out having drinks, and suddenly the community, especially in a country like Hong Kong where it's a lot of expats, it really brings itself together. And suddenly you know someone that knows someone, and everybody's connected, and it creates this pool of people that you have this visibility of everybody that is, you're be able to outreach to a PR person or a journalist, and you're able to talk to a recruiter just like that. And so when I got here to Amsterdam, which was just as COVID was, well, not even lifting, but we were just starting to think about physical events. What's that? And I went looking for, I said, forget these, we're up to here with digital events. We'd all been doing all these webinars and seminars and, whatever online for the last year and a half, or in Hong Kong, 2 years with COVID. And I said, where are the people? Where are the marketing people? Let's get to know them. And so I looked around. I found nothing, albeit that this city may not have had it, because also you're talking about, if you go to New York, London, Hong Kong, of course, all these places will cater to this sort of event. But Amsterdam didn't seem to have anything that was kind of face-to-face. And so I started the Marketing Breakfast Club Amsterdam chapter, saying, hey, let's do roundtables. Let's try and bring down, let's try and get leaders around a table, put down our weapons. We all compete for the same jobs at times. We'll all do different things, but let's have a moment to reflect on trends, to worry, to complain, to really be able to, share things really tete-a-tete, face-to-face, which has nothing to do with the digital. And so that's where the roundtables were born. And the way I reached out to people was really a cold approach. But again, cold approaches...
Going back to Natalia's cold outreach.
But cold approaches, if you work on the psyche of the person, everybody wants to talk about their opinions and everybody wants to be heard. So a roundtable, it's going to work because they're like, oh, and it's a personal invitation to roundtable, and I can go and I can be spoken. So it wasn't a hard sell. And then what I wanted to do is I wanted to make those leaders then have these mingles over drinks once a month at a bar. And that flopped. I mean, majorly flopped, because, and this is part of the essence of the Marketing Breakfast Club, is not everything you do across the globe is going to resonate city by city. You need to localize things, as we all know. And so we said, okay, a lot of Dutch leaders have families. It's 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Gotta go home. I want my family. Don't bother me. So we dropped the drinks for a few months, and I thought, hey, why don't we put it on Meetup? So I put it on Meetup, and this flurry, young people looking for jobs or looking for career progression, people that were new into the city by like a day, people that were visiting the city and were marketing. And they're like, I don't live here, but I saw this and decided to join. Flood into these drinks, and that really fed the community, the growth of the community, the organic growth of the community. And then it started growing city by city, whereby somebody was moving to Lisbon and wanted to take it to Lisbon, and somebody now in Dubai, and she just started in Dubai, and it's a great opportunity because there's brand equity to it and you can build it, and everybody wants to go there, and you don't pay for it, and you share ideas. And so that's the essence of it. I mean, the Northern Star for the Marketing Breakfast Club is to create the biggest marketing network in the world, city by city. because it won't work at a global scale when you're trying to apply things. You're not going to have networking drinks in Dubai, trust me. You'll have tea times, but that might not work. Or so it just picked up this traction I didn't expect it to, and it's 2 years, and now we're 4 cities, and we got amazing people like you on the committee, and couldn't ask for more. I mean, hands up.
Amazing. And I think it's amazing to think of how much this grew in 2 years.
Yeah,
just celebrated 2 years a few weeks ago. And it's now over 700, right? 700 members.
Yeah, 750 and growing. Yeah, and you're always getting someone every day come in, and I was going through the list of the Marketing Breakfast Club, the MBCA in Amsterdam, and I was so pleased to see that I saw recruiters on it, that I saw people that had been in sales that were going into marketing, people that were looking for jobs. So it has been a one-stop shop for, everyone marketing. And the best thing is now conferences are starting to take interest in this. So we've got conferences coming in and saying, hey, would you promote us? We'll give you a discount. You've got the community in your hands on LinkedIn. Promote us with a discount. You guys get a couple free passes, and it's just opened up a whole wave of opportunities. And only yesterday, I had a younger crew of the Marketing Breakfast Club, and he said, "Hey, I always see that you do these leadership roundtables, but what about us more junior? Would we be able to do that?" And I thought, yeah, I mean, if you want to take that on, and the sky's the limit, which is the beauty, and everybody's keen to participate when you don't have to pay to play.
That's amazing. And do you see, so kind of like with events, do you see community as a play that could be relevant for startups, scale-ups, founders as well?
In terms of creating communities for them?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Or participating in relevant communities, for example.
We actually get startups come up to our drinks and look for marketeers, for example, and that's where it's starting to really work, where people are like, oh, I need someone fractional. Do you guys do that? And we're like, we all are. But
throw a rock, you'll find 5 fractionals.
But the beauty of this, as is fractional, it's not about marketing. You can have communities of all sorts of things. And as a matter of fact, Marketing Breakfast Club got inspiration because my husband's HR, and he used to go in Hong Kong to HR in the pub, and all they would do is have drinks and mingle. I'm like, that's easy. So I think, in Amsterdam, you've got some fantastic startup communities that are really led by some very incredible people. But I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she's in hospitality, and she sees all these gaps. I'm like, why don't you just create a little bit of a learning and development community for the hospitality biz? We've got the tools for it. We don't need anything. We don't need to pay for anything, let alone, like, you've got LinkedIn, you've got word of mouth. It takes a little bit of push. It takes a little bit of, making the story crisp enough so that people understand why you're doing it. And then, people are going to, go to you because you're filling a little gap there, even if it's a social one, or even if it's just connecting. But the key to fractional, and the key to, I think, being able to have this sort of career and help communities grow is networks and connections. We are social animals, and so we thrive with that.
All right. Let's segue this into something completely different. So, we talked a lot about communities. We talked about events. We've talked about, how you built this amazing community, and how you built your career based on ballsy cold outreach initially, and putting yourself out there, and that worked fantastic for you. But it doesn't always work fantastically, and sometimes putting yourself out there kind of backfires. Do you have a fracked up moment that backfired that you can share with us?
Well, I have on events, I have been very close to fracking up. Um, I I say yes to everything at the moment. And for now, I say yes to. I've always said yes to every. I was in Saudi Arabia teaching a leadership development program because I said yes, and I was like, "What have I done?" And then it was the best thing I've done in the year. But one thing that I would say is, especially for events, especially for speaking engagements, if you don't know your stuff, if you're out there talking about things, walking the walk, maybe even faking till you make it, you've got to know, you've got to defend yourself with knowing the stuff that you're talking about. And I've found myself in a couple of situations, in particular, talking about cryptocurrencies, and I was like, right over. Um, and I'm like, okay, I kind of need to step away from this. Luckily, I wasn't on stage for that. But another, so I think preparation when it comes to events and speaking, I think that's know your stuff. But another frac moment that I thought would be interesting to share, especially because it's a very good lesson to learn that hopefully I only made that mistake, but I'm sure a lot of us have, is in fractional. In my early days, I was pricing differently. Every client had a different price. Every pitch had a different, everything. But my hourly rate,
I think that
it's
is
fine
true for a lot of fractionals.
and it's fair. But for me, get your hourly rate right was one thing, because obviously with more buying power or a different circumstance, I would shift my hourly rates substantially, and to the point that I caught myself out on it. And so again, like, know your stuff, remember what you're pitching, who you're pitching to, because it can really catch up with you that suddenly you've got all these different rates and packages and deals going. But if you're not super clear, you might trip on yourself. And I did. And actually the client caught me out and they were like, wait a second, you're charging us one rate, but you said another one. And I'm like, oh, I fracked up. And so, what I learned there is it is what it is. Go with honesty. You've got to be transparent. Say you're sorry. I ended up charging a lot less than what I, was initially going to do.
Wanted, yeah.
But I think that clarity, especially in the early days when you're like, bang, well, here and this and that, and you need a little bit of structure behind pricing.
Yes, on that I can totally agree and totally relate. And I think, I think that's true, because I think a lot of fractionals, especially early on, kind of try to figure out their pricing and like what would make sense here. How much should I charge? And I heard I don't remember who it was that once said, if like send out a proposal. If your proposal gets accepted, next time you do a proposal, increase your price by 20% or 15%, and keep doing that until you get a pushback. And then when you get a pushback, take it like 10% lower. And if someone said, and if you get yeses on that, like that's your sweet spot of pricing. But yeah, I totally resonate with what you're saying. And I also was working with smaller startups, had kind of like one pricing in place, and then came across like this bigger customer, US based. I'm like, okay, they can afford it. Yeah. Let's increase the price 30%. And then they pushed back very, very hard. And then, that didn't work, obviously. So yeah, I think, figuring out like how do you price is a really big thing.
Yeah, it's tricky, but it's important.
So how does it look like for you today? Do you have kind of like your set price, or do you still have fluctuations and you're just better at, not not fracking up and telling them two different price points?
So no, so I have a baseline, which is hourly, and then I've got retainer rate. And then obviously project based will be depending on what's needed. And then what I do is I actually have a couple of different rates, which I call the kind of discounted rates. and I play them discounted rates if the initial rates don't work. But I'm always sticking to those two. So it'll be like a 10% or it'll be a 20%. Maybe you throw in the friends and family thing and you're like, oh yeah, and you don't, but you always make sure that you have it on Excel and that you touch one hourly rate and then it all syncs up so that your hourly rate makes sense with your retainer rate, only with a little bit of a discount. And so, it really needs to make sense. You're not going to have the same hourly rate and a massive retainer rate if the hourly doesn't, if they might as well go for hourly. So you really need to think about that specifically. So now I just keep it to like 3 sets and then it's the discounted rates. Like for you.
Makes sense.
This one.
All right. So let's move to our quickfire round. So I'll ask you a couple of questions and answer whatever comes to mind. Frac or fiction? Founders should own the go-to-market strategy and not hand it off, especially not to someone who's outside of the company.
I wish fiction, although that's not always the case. No, I always think, you can co-create, but you have experts for a reason. And a go-to-market strategy can be very broad, and it can be, very high level, which I think that's great when you've got the founders involved in that. But then, there are smaller parts of the equation that need to be completed by the experts. And, one thing I'm always fighting is a go-to-market strategy that gets you sales versus or in tandem with a go-to-market strategy that gets you a long-term value. And they're very opposing because sales is what's giving you the money and the numbers. And there are a lot of, especially in the startups, show me the money. That's what they want, right? It makes sense.
They don't have the bandwidth to plan 3 years in advance. They need sales next month.
Exactly. And sales is what's getting investment. And that's your number, that's your picture, that's your framing. However, survival in a hyper conglomerated world of competition, you've got to think of go-to-market foundations that aren't only going to lead you to sales. You've got to think about the broader upper funnel long-term plays of the brand, the purpose, the awareness. And then from there, how do you align maybe a go-to-market a marketing campaign that is aimed at conversion, but then in parallel, you've got a campaign that is aimed at continuing your brand awareness and your story and your purpose. And so I find that a lot of times founders go for the money and forget on that go-to-market strategy the importance of embedding the foundations of a long-term strategy with that go-to-market, because it's still go-to-market even though it's not tomorrow. It's in a few years or in a year's time. But I think that's important, and founders have different goals potentially than marketeers that might see different angles and maybe a wider spread view of what go-to-market could be.
Okay. What is the number one tool in your toolbox that you swear by, that you can't go into a project without?
I mean, I would say network, but without the project, I mean, for me, ChatGPT has been absolutely, and I know you're probably getting this a lot, but
I prefer network. That's a better question.
But I've been creating these little bots in ChatGPT and been tailoring them, and they've swooped out the whole need for research. Like I've got, a lot of the work that I do is really about new market entry and being able to do some very big SWOT analyses on what countries to target within Africa, for example, and why those, and how do you tier them. I mean, it's nuked out a whole different, a hire that I might have had to have. So I would say for that, but obviously your network, and again, in services and well, maybe across the whole all industries, but one of the things I'm always looking at is where are the opportunities outside the usual ABCs of performance marketing, right? You've got your campaigns, you've got all your performance in place, everything is working on a digital side. Are we thinking about partnerships? Are we thinking about events? Are you speaking? Are you an expert? Well, why aren't you on stage? Right. So there's so much more to that. And I think that that's where network comes in, right? And you're like, well, let's talk about partnerships. And then you go out and you meet people and you bring together. And I think that's of huge value because it will end up differentiating you in a way that maybe others don't.
All right.
So network.
What's your definition of a dream client versus a nightmare client?
Well, a dream client pays on time and and never misses the bill and always says yes. No, I would say a dream client is a client where you are open, they are open-minded, and you are open, heartfelt to be able to have any conversation with them. Because I always try and find, because I'm not on the performance side, I always try to find things out of the box, things of new ways of doing things. And if clients are wedded to an idea and that's the way they want to go forward, then fine, that's the way we'll do it. But, the new opportunities there, I think, are missed. So it's important that you have a client that is, has that open mind, has that flexibility, has that curiosity, to test and learn. And never are we in a better position as now to trial things and, come up with things that didn't exist. So I think that's it. And obviously I haven't had a really bad client, but I've had some.
Lucky you.
I have had some very, very, very close to be clients that have completely disappeared. And this is like, I would rather not work with them. But, a cold shoulder when you are about to sign is an interesting one. And
very negative sign, very big red flag, I would say.
Yeah. But I mean, like that. So that's kind of the client you want to stay away from.
Agreed on that. Where do you see the future of fractional? That's a big one.
Oh, I love it. I see it progressing into something much bigger than it even is now. I mean, now it's just starting in Europe and it's already big in the US. But, I think that there are two elements. One is the hyper-personalized world we live in. And, we are, as customers, expecting hyper-personalization in our product marketing, for example. Why not, as a corporate, do I not personalize or hyper-personalize the projects and the needs that I have? Why do I need an events team when I have 3 events and I can bring on an expert team? Why do I not bring in, a team of fractionals that are, or a fractional that's going to create something new with different perspectives? It's like a jigsaw. And I do see, that side of hyper-personalization in the corporate side, with fractional and projects and being able to add all these add-ons in a way to changing the way of working. And I also see the personal side of people and progression. And again, I was talking to this person yesterday about this, and she's on burnout and she can't take it anymore. And she's like, why do we need to do 9 to 5 and have these jobs? And you go, we don't. And
you don't, exactly.
COVID has changed a lot of this. COVID was the one that said, suddenly I can be in my living room on a camera and it's okay, or I don't need to be in the office. And so with that shift in mindset in the organizations, in their benefit as well, because they don't have pensions to pay and downturns, et cetera, and the fact that you can plug and play your way of working, I do believe that this is definitely the way forward in the future. Of course, there are always going to be the 9 to 5 jobs, and you're always going to have, but I think that you're going to have CFOs that or auditors that have 5 different companies they're auditing, and that it's going to change. So why not do that? Money's better, flexibility, work. So I do think it's here to stay, and I'm very excited for it. Now it's our turn to kind of start helping companies understand that. We as fractionals understand this, but I think the companies, especially the big ones, not so much.
They're not there yet.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. All right. Before we wrap this up, and I do have one last question. So before we get to my last question, who's your ICP, or what type of businesses do you see yourself working with right now? So if there's a founder listening in right now and he's like, oh, I like Natalia's take. What's your definition of an ICP that should reach out to you?
I would say it's businesses that are already established that are looking to expand. And that is looking to expand because they have their sales happening, they've got their product in place, but they don't know where they're going with their brand, or they need some foundation, and then putting that structure in place. And then the second type is I would say companies that are looking to expand internationally or into different cities. And what does that look like? Because as we talked before, you can't go with a one size fits all. And I think that's really important.
Exactly.
That was something that I really learned a lot of in Asia. And how do you keep your brand essence and localize without losing it? But also, a lot of times companies grow in a position where they're very fast growing, and suddenly they see themselves where they've got an acquisition here and a couple brands there, and then they've got a team that's working, and the sales team's working, the marketing's not. And so being able to bring that all together, and again, give that foundational restructure. What does your brand look like? How are your teams working? And how do you ensure that your go-to-market strategy is aligned not only at a brand and marketing perspective, but into your sales and your BD people and into the stakeholders of the business, and that you're all speaking the same language? So quite broad.
So if that resonates with you, reach out to Natalia. All right. So before we wrap this up, I like to end every episode with the same question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's thinking about going fractional, so maybe someone who's a bit earlier in their career path, aspiring to be fractional, thinking about that, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would say you need to trust yourself. You need to have trust in yourself, which I think a lot of us, especially when you're doubting to go fractional or not, it's because you're in some segue in your career. But it's important to believe that you can do what you want to do as a fractional. And unfortunately, you don't have those 360 reviews, and you don't have a pat on your back from your boss to tell you things are doing well. So that trust in your knowledge and your capabilities is essential to pull through. And then the second thing would be never say no. Just always just keep going for the opportunities, because one opportunity will go to another one. Even if it's small, even if it's something that's insignificant, you never know what that opportunity is going to take you into something else.
Okay. I asked for one, I got two. Those are two great pieces of advice, and I really like the first one. I think I'm gonna start a roundup of all the advice that all the guests gave. I think that will be an interesting
That's a good idea. Yeah,
exactly. All right, so I think that wraps things up for us today. Natalia, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode.
Thank you so much, Adir. Thanks.
And thank you for listening on whatever platform you're listening or watching us on YouTube. If you enjoy this conversation, please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. Tell a fellow fractional or fellow founder about the podcast. And thank you again for listening in today. And Natalia, thank you again for joining. And I'll see you all next time.